Alrighty, so this is a crash course video on how to use your TI-84 to graph functions and find maximums, minimums, etc. As requested. We'll go through how to input functions, use the variable button, type in linear functions, then we'll go into more specific things like raising x to a power, absolute values, and roots. Then we'll go into the graphing part, so how to change your window and how to use a zoom box. And then we'll go over how to find maximums and minimums and zeros. So to start, you turn on your calculator, right? So you hit this little on button down here. You see a little blinking cursor right there. To turn it off, all you do is you hit second, on again, turns it right back off. So yeah, easy step, get it on. And then next step is going to be, so we're going to work on inputting functions. So what you do is you go to this little y equals up here, right? That takes you to this screen. You have y1 through y7 and a bunch of plots. So these little rows here are where you input your functions that you want to graph or that you want to find something out about. So, but the way that you type a function on a calculator is you use the variable button. So the variable button is this guy right here, x, t, omega, n, this little guy here. If you hit that button, it'll give you an x, okay? So the way you type functions into a calculator, you type them out just like you would type them on like a computer or how you would write it by hand. You use this for your x, and you use all of these buttons to type the rest of the function. So for a nice easy example, let's just do a line. If we do 3x plus 2, it'll look like this. So you hit 3x plus 2, nice and simple, and you graph it, you'll get a line. Cool, fun, easy. Okay, you can also put in two functions at once and get both on the same graph. You just use these up and down keys to navigate to another y. You type in another function and it'll also show up. So for example, let's say we want to graph another line with this line. Let's do negative x plus 3. You hit the little negative symbol, negative x plus 3. And if you look at that on the graph, you'll see we have a second line. Nice and cool. All right, so what do we do if we want to clear a row? You just use those up and down arrows, right? You go to the row that you want to clear or that you want to input something into, and you hit this clear button right here, and it all goes away. If you are analyzing a function, make sure that all of these are cleared before you start working. So then what do you do if you have something more complicated than just a line? So let's look into first raising a number to a power. So for example, let's say you want to graph x squared. To do a power, you first type your x, right, because it's x squared. Then you use this guy right here, the little caret. That takes you up into power land, and you type in your power. So if we're squaring it, you hit 2. And then you'll see right here we have that little forward arrow. So to get out of power land, right, to go back down, you just hit this forward arrow here, and that takes you out. So nice and simple, we now have x squared. Okay, let's do a couple examples of that. So let's say we want to do 3x cubed minus 5x squared plus 6. So 3x cubed, we do 3x, and then we use the little caret, raise up, cubed. We go out of power land, and then we do minus 5x squared. X, go up to power land, 2, then escape, plus 6. And then nice and simple, we have a little cubed function. Cool. And then this method of using the little caret can be used for any power. So you can go crazy, go up to x to the 7th, whatever you'd like. Just remember, you hit the x, you hit the little caret, you type in your power, let's say it's 7, and then you use the forward button to get out. Nice and easy. Okay. Next thing that you guys are going to have to know how to graph is graphing absolute values. So graphing absolute values involves using this button over here, this math button. So what you do is, in order to get absolute value, so you want the two vertical lines, right? You hit math, and then you hit this little right arrow so that you go to the number menu here. And the first thing here says ABS, which means absolute value. So your little cursor, right, the thing that you can move up and down, is highlighting the 1, and you hit enter, and that gets you your little vertical lines for absolute value. So you can type whatever you want in here. Let's just do absolute value of x, and that gets us our little v that we're used to. Now this works a lot like an exponent. So you can add things inside here, right? Let's say we want to do, x plus 2, right? And then let's say we want to add something on the outside to escape the absolute value lines. You use your front arrow again, and that takes you outside, and you can add a 1, right? And that shifts the graph as expected. So nice and simple. To go over it one more time, you hit math, right arrow, and then enter. And that gets you your little absolute value symbols. So super cool, pretty easy. Next step is learning how to do roots. So you guys have probably seen square roots, cube roots, maybe some higher roots if we're feeling a little fancy. But the way you use a root, you put a root into a calculator. You use that math button again. So you hit math, and then you'll notice here number 5 is x and then a little root symbol. So we go down to number 5 and hit enter. That gives us the form that you're used to seeing for roots, right? We have the index here and then the radicand here. So let's say we wanted to do the cube root of x, right? So our index is 3. You hit 3, and then in order to get out of that little area, you hit the forward button. That takes you inside, and then you type what you want inside, and then you hit the forward area again to get out of there. And boom, we have cube root of x. And it looks, just like that ocean lounge chair that we were talking about in class. So nice and simple. You can use that to graph any root that you'd like. So remember math, then down to number 5. And then let's say we want to do, the 7th root of x. 7, forward arrow, x, forward arrow, enter. And nice and simple. That gives us the 7th root of x, which looks kind of similar except narrower. All right, and then just like you can do with the absolute value, you can add different things inside the cube root and outside. So let's say we wanted to do the cube root of 2x plus 1 and then minus 4 outside. So we do our math, we go down to our cube root, or our root, and then we make it 3, so cube root, forward arrow, and then we wanted 2x plus 1 inside, so 2x plus 1. And then we want to get outside there and say, okay, we want to do minus 4. Oh, sorry, wrong type. There we go. If you ever type the wrong thing, you can use this arrow to go back and forth. And once you hover over the thing, you hit delete. And you'll see it goes away. So 4. And then would you look at that? We have our function shifted and stretched as we would expect it to be. So nice and simple. Now we know how to do powers, absolute values, and roots. Now let's talk about domain restrictions. So domain restrictions are a little bit fancy. They have to do with when you have a function that's only defined in a certain area of x. So let's say we had this function, but we only wanted to see it from 1 to 5, and everything else doesn't matter. So the way this works is you're able to input your domain into here. So for our first example, we're going to actually do one from the homework. And it was, if you guys remember, it was the last question on the last quiz, and it looks like this. So your function was y equals x cubed 3x plus 2, and then your domain was just -2 to +2. So the way you input this into the calculator is you type in your function like normal, right? So we have x cubed, x, little caret, cubed, minus 3x, minus 3x plus 2. Okay, so this gives us the function like usual. It's going to look just like that, okay? But we only care about it from -2 to +2. So how do we put that into the calculator? So you type in the function as usual, right? X cubed minus 3x plus 2. We know how to do that. Then you hit divide, parenthesis, and then you're going to type in your domain restrictions here. So the catch with domain restrictions is that the calculator cannot take a compound inequality, right? So the restriction -2 to +2, right? You would write it out like this, where you have -2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 2. But the calculator doesn't like that. You can't type that in. You have to type it in like this, where it's a single inequality and then you use the and symbol to combine them, and then you use the other inequality. So -2 is less than or equal to x, right, which is this side, and then -2 x is less than or equal to 2, which is this side. So we can use the calculator to type this into our little parentheses up here. So how do we do that? Well, -2 is less than or equal to x is the first one. That's pretty simple. -2, okay. How do we do the less than or equal to symbol? Now this is where we learn how to use the test function. So you hit second, math, and then you'll see here you get a little selection menu of all the different inequality symbols. So we're looking for less than 6, so we go to number 6, and we hit enter. And it appears in our thing, okay? So it's less than, -2 is less than or equal to x, so you hit x. Now we need to put in the and. So the and is a logic symbol, and we find it by going to second, math, and then we go to the right, use the little arrow key here to go logic, and you'll see here the first thing is and. So you hit enter, and then we type in our second rule. So this is x is less than or equal to 2. So we do x, and then we want to do the less than or equal to symbol. So remember we do second math, and that takes us to the list. Less than or equal to 2. And then make sure over here, after you have all of your rules listed out, you close your parentheses. So now we have our function limited to -2 to +2. And if we look at our graph, boom, look at that. It's just -2 to +2. Nice and cool. Okay. So let's do a couple more examples of that. Let's say, okay, instead we have, to practice absolute values, we're going to do y equals 2 absolute value x minus 6 on the domain -∞ to 0 and then 2 to infinity. So first we want to plug in the function, right? So if you guys remember from earlier how we do our absolute value, so we want 2 absolute value x minus 6. So we hit 2, and then we want to put in our absolute value symbol. So we go to math, number, absolute value, and then we have x minus 6. X minus 6. Nice, cool. We have our function input. Now we need to put in the domain restrictions. So remember how I talked about earlier, right? That you can't input a compound inequality, right? So we need to write this out as 2 little things with less than and less than or equal to symbols, right? So we translate that domain, right? -∞ to 0 and then 2 to infinity, right? And remember this symbol here, instead of being an and, now it is an or, right? Because these two are 2 separate things, right? It's over here and then over here. They're not connected, so you have to use or instead of and this time. So as you remember from earlier, we do divide by, parenthesis, and then we want to write x is less than 0. So we do x, and then we do second math, and then we get the less than symbol, and we do less than 0. Perfect, okay? Now we need to put in our or, so we do second math, and then we go over to the logic, and we hit or. Nice and cool. Okay. And then we have to do x is greater than or equal to 2. So x, and then second math, greater than or equal to is here. Enter, 2. And then remember to close that parenthesis. Nice and cool. So now we have our function limited to... Oh, did I input it wrong? Oh, it's just you can't see it. My bad. Okay. So you see here, right, it's 2 to infinity, but the stuff on this side must be bigger than 10. So we're going to go to our window and then change our y max to like 15. And oh my god, would you look at that? See? So now it's that function, except this part of the domain is not included. So it's less than 0 and then greater than or equal to 2. So nice and cool, nice and fun. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so let's now go into talking about finding maximums and minimums. So first things first, let's go back to the question from the exam, because you guys are all familiar with that one. So y equals x to the third, minus 3x plus 2. And then we want to input, remember the bounds, so divide by parenthesis, -2, second math, less than or equal to 2, or less than or equal to x, and then we want to do the and symbol, and x second math is less than or equal to 2, and parentheses. Awesome. So, whoop. Remember, our function looked like this. Nice and cool. Okay, so our first thing we're going to talk about is how to change our window. So changing your window, right now my window is showing me -10 to +10 on the x-axis and -10 to +10 on the y-axis. So this is a nice place to start. Usually this will capture most portions of the functions you're dealing with. So it's a good default, but it won't always contain the function that you care about. In this case, we do contain the function we care about, but we can change our window, right? The way we do this is we set our x-min and our x-max and our y-min and our y-max. So let's say, okay, we want to see a bigger picture, right? So you do -20 to +20, and then -20 to +20. As a note, these y-SCL and x-SCL, never mess with those. Just leave them 1 all the time. Okay, so you'll notice right now, see, we zoomed out a little bit, right? So we see bigger on the x and bigger on the y. You can also mess with it a little bit funky. So for this, let's go back to -10 to +10 so we can see what's going on. -10 to +10. And you see the function here, okay. And we want to zoom in on this so we can see the details of our function, right? So if you look at this, we know our x values are going to be -2 to +2. So let's go here and do for x-min -2 and y-min +2. Okay, nice and cool. So you'll see how, you can make the ones uneven. So it can be up 10 on the y-axis and 2 on the x-axis. It doesn't matter. So we have our function here. Okay, cool. But the y-axis is really big for no reason. So we care about, let's do -1, and then right here is like, +5. So -1 to +5, right? And okay, cool. We have a nice, pretty little zoomed in vision of our graph. It can show everything that we care about. So practice changing your window, but basically just imagine that you're outlining a box around the part of the function you care about, and then set your x-mins and x-maxes and y-mins and y-maxes to what, lets you see the function. Next, I'm going to show you this thing called a zoom box. So this is like a cheat code to what the window stuff. So let's say, okay, let's go back to our default, -10 to +10, -10 to +10, right? That takes us back to the screen here. And okay, let's say I want to zoom in on that function and see it up close, but I don't have the energy or I don't care to, figure out exactly what numbers to plug into my window. So to do this, you hit zoom. We use a zoom box, right? So we hit zoom. The first thing is zoom box. You hit enter. Okay, and now you are controlling a little cursor. You can see it blinking on the screen here with your little arrow keys, right? And so in order to make our zoom box, you go all the way above the function and then all the way to the left of the function, and then you hit enter, okay? Then you go all the way below the function and all the way to the right of the function, and you'll see you're drawing out this little box here, and then you hit enter. And when you look at that, it creates a little zoomed in view for you. Super cool. Okay, so once you have this, you have your function input, you've adjusted your window so that you can see things. This is when you get into finding your maximums and minimums and finding your zeros. So I'm actually going to input a function that is useful to us because it's going to let us find maximums and minimums and zeros and practice all of that we just did all together again. Okay, so let's start. Clear, window, we'll just go back to -10, +10, -10 to +10, and let's say, okay, the function we're going to do learn all of our maximums and minimums and zeros with is going to be this guy here. So y equals x cubed minus 4x plus 1 on the interval from -3 to +5. So let's type in our y equals x cubed minus 4x plus 1. So y equals x caret cubed and then minus 4x plus 1. Cool. And then we want to input -3 to +5. So we do our divide symbol parenthesis, and then we do -3 second math less than or equal to x, and then we do second math and, right? Because this one is an and thing because it's it's a one interval together, and then x is less than or equal to 5. So x second math less than or equal to 5, and then remember end parentheses. Okay, super cool. Okay, so the function obviously is bigger than we care about, and then we want to deal with finding the minimums and the maximums and the zeros. Okay, so the minimum, right? If just visual inspection, local minimum is here, local maximum is here, and our zeros, right, where it intersects the x-axis is here, here, and here. Okay, so everything we care about is like right in the middle here. So let's do a zoom box to zoom in on that little space. So we hit zoom, enter, go up above and to the left of the function. Make sure you really are above. Enter, and then down, below, to the right of the function. I hope that's big enough to capture everything, and hit enter. Oh, nice, perfect, we did capture everything. Okay, so same function, just zoomed in, right? And we have our zeros here, and then our maximum and our minimum, okay? So first, let's start with finding the maximum. The way that you do this is you hit second, and then you hit trace. And that takes you to this screen here, the calculate screen, and you say, okay, I'm looking for my maximum. So you go down, use your little arrows to get to maximum, hit enter. Okay, and then it's asking you left bound. Okay, so you use these two arrow keys, this guy and this guy, to go to the left side of your maximum. So you just go over here and you say, okay, this is my maximum, and I'm going to the left of my maximum. Okay, so the little cursor is over here to the left of the maximum, and you hit enter. Okay, so now it's asking right bound. Now you go to the right of your maximum, and you hit enter. Cool. All right, and then it says guess. So this is where you say, okay, I'm going to get as close to that maximum as I can. All right, so I move the arrow right up to the maximum, and I hit enter. And then boom, it gives you the maximum. So this point on this function, the maximum is roughly -1.15, 4.08. So you'd write that down, record it, nice and simple. Cool. Okay, so now let's find our minimum. So our minimum is going to be over here, and we use the roughly the same procedure. So you hit second, trace, that takes you to the minimum here, and you go down to, you say, okay, I want a minimum, go to minimum, hit enter, and it's going to ask you the same questions. So you say, okay, left bound. So go over here towards your little minimum, and you say, okay, I'm going to mark right here to the left side of your minimum, enter, and then the right side of the minimum is going to be over here. See, right bound, right side of the minimum, hit enter, and then you say guess. So you go kind of down into that pocket, close to the bottom as you can, and you hit enter. And it's going to give you the minimum. So your minimum down here, 1.1547, comma, -2. I think that's 68. So nice and simple, pretty easy to find your maximums and minimums. Okay, remember, so it's second, trace, you select the one you want, you do the left bound, enter, the right bound, enter, and then right on top of it, enter, and it'll spit out the answer. So that's nice and easy. The final thing we're going to go over is how to find a zero. So the zeros, remember, are where the graph intersects the x-axis. Okay, and you can see these ones aren't going to be pretty, so we want to find them on the graph instead of by factoring. So what you do is you hit the same thing, second trace, and you say, okay, I want a 0. You hit enter, okay, and then you say, okay, the calculator is only going to find you 1 0 at a time. So you got to choose your 0. So let's say, okay, because I'm already over here, let's do this 0 first. So I go right up to the left of this 0, you hit enter, and then over to the right of the 0, hit enter, and then you go kind of right close to it, right, and you hit enter, and now my 0 is at x equals 1.86. Cool, so I got one of them, and then you just do the same procedure to find the other two. So you hit second, calc, go down to 0, hit enter, and you say, okay, now let's find this one. So I gotta go to the left of this guy, but not too far away, right? You don't want to be all the way on the other side of the other 0. So you go right up here to the left of him, hit enter, go to the right of him, hit enter, and then you go right on top of him, hit enter, and then it gives you my next 0, which is x equals a 0.254. Cool, and then the final one, same procedure, second trace, 0, and then I want to go all the way over here, 5 years later, a journey. Okay, and then we go here, right, you hit enter, and then you go to the right of it, hit enter, and then go right on top of her and hit enter. And cool, so our final 0 is negative 2.115. So, cool. All right, so that's some basics on how to input functions into the calculator and how to find different characteristics using the graphing calculator, like maximums and minimums and zeros. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And yeah, hopefully this was helpful. All right.